my flask. I'm just like, welcome to
Okay,
the games industry.
welcome. This is the game interviews. So we have game devs that come on and talk about the games industry, some of their work history, the tips and tricks for people that are just getting started, and then just general advice and a little bit of just kind of talking about the state of the industry and where we think it's going. So tonight I have on Brian Fasten. Would you like to introduce yourself, Brian?
Sure, I appreciate that. Yeah, so my name is Brian Fasten. I'm a QA analyst at Epic Games, specializing in performance. For the last about year and a half, I've bounced around from Paragon to the mobile project Battle Breakers. So it's been interesting.
So, which of the two did you like working on more? What was it, Battle Breakers or Paragon?
Tough call. My experiences from when I worked at Shell led me to do mobile. So switching back to that after learning like console stuff was very interesting.
Yeah.
It's kind of a toss up. Depending on the day and which project's more on fire, I could give you a different answer.
So, what did you do when you were at Shell Games?
So when I started at Shell, I was actually hired on as an optimization intern because getting games to run on tablets is tricky, and we were ramping up doing collision work and cutting down mesh sizes, making LODs before Simply Gone eliminated the need for that.
Now,
So,
do you feel like other people do this position, or is this a common job, like for
I,
people just getting started?
I mean, for people getting started, I don't think performance is like the thing that they think to do, right? Like
Yeah.
usually, especially coming like out of a school like the Art Institute, where I've gone to and you had gone to and Greg's gone to.
Uh-huh.
It's very interesting that that's not really something that's talked about. It kind of happened once I was in a production environment. There's a need for someone that can understand the artistic side of things, but then also just crunch numbers. So it was kind of a weird point where like, hey, I'm good at math and I'm okay at modeling. Let's give him this thing and make some spreadsheets. It's fine. Uh,
Yeah.
I don't think it's like a position people dream to do, but then like if you find out you're good at it, it's a very necessary role that you can fill.
No, I 100% agree with that. You end up with this thing where performance is like the most important thing about games. Like gameplay needs to be good, right, to make
Yep.
sales, but like if it can't run, like you're never going to sell a copy,
Mm-mm.
you know. And when you go to school, it's like again, it's not glamorous, and you don't
Uh-uh.
think about it. And they don't really teach it a lot, right?
No, I mean during our curriculum, basically, if it didn't crash the editor, you were allowed to do
Yeah.
it, and it's very interesting that you get to a production environment. And they're like, "Hold on, that's 650 verts. It's like LOD3. No, no, no. Like back it up a little bit. Cut that down." It's very interesting because it's a very necessary role, and yeah, school doesn't really touch on it because they know what sells is like pretty portfolio objects and landing those very like high demand jobs where they're like, if you're like, oh yeah, we graduated like 30% of our classes performance techs, they're gonna be like, what the heck is this?
Yeah. Now,
So
even like from the light amount of teaching that I've done, it's like you talk about draw calls, which is a very common topic in games,
yeah.
and it's not usually taught at curriculum level.
Mm-mm.
Now, not saying that there's certain schools out there that don't teach it and really good professors, but even that fundamental understanding of the performance of games and how critical that is to the industry is just mind blowing to me at times that people really don't have those skills.
It is very surprising, especially for students and recent graduates that want to jump straight into like a very large scale production. It's assumed knowledge for some of those experienced guys, and to come off the street and be like, I want to make these pretty things, but not understanding the cost that's going to have three systems deep is it's very hard to teach until you're just there and learning it on firsthand. Uh,
What could people learn or like look into if this was something they were interested in doing or potentially a path? Like what do you think is important for them to look into?
it's surprisingly enough, I like your data organization and things are very important. Presenting when things are on fire and why concisely is a very important skill to have. So even just being comfortable in like office suites and things is very important. Also
Yeah.
understanding your debugging tools in the editor. Don't be afraid to like type in, like, open up your console, type in a stat dot RHI command or whatever, start poking at those, start looking at what the millisecond costs are for things, and kind of start putting the picture together. There's a lot you can do by just opening demo scenes and like running some of the like profiling tools and seeing what's going on.
Yeah, that's a great question. Like, you didn't necessarily have like a QA portfolio.
Uh-uh.
like, but like, it's weird, right? Is like that a thing that should exist?
It's debatable. I mean, to be honest, when I got my job here, I brought some of the sample stuff I had done at Shell on Lexica and showed that to them. I showed them examples of some of the stuff we had found and how we were optimizing down for it, and kind of proving that you can find an issue related to that and drilling it down to its core issues and then presenting that to other people so that like devs can fix them, or if you're a junior dev kind of thing, you can maybe fix it yourself. Being able to understand those systems at the core level and expressing them clearly is very important. uh,
Yeah.
so it's interesting. There's really not a way to like specialize a portfolio for that, except when you have your own assets in your own environments or characters or whatever, showing your breakdowns of your work and showing that you understand why you're doing X process or like a Y thing.
Yeah.
It's important. Showing your work and explaining why you're doing something a certain way gets you a long way.
Hmm. No. Like, it's so curious to me that QA just kind of like, it's kind of a dark art in a way at times where someone's like, yo, how'd you get into QA? You're like, I just got the job.
Yeah, I mean, really, I'll be honest. A lot of times it's like you blink. It's just like you say yes to a certain thing, and you just keep saying yes, and down the line it goes until you're like, well, how did I get here? What am I doing? Uh,
And that's a good question. Like, what did you get? What got you into games and the games industry in the first place? Like, why this industry? Like, why
Oh,
games?
so just kind of one of the typical stories. Real young, I had a couple of influential games over my childhood that really made me like the medium. I never really considered myself like the designing type. I liked making pretty things, and games were a visual medium that I like really enjoyed. So then it was like, okay, like got to about sixth grade, and I'm like, I want to make games, and it never changed. It was just middle school, high school, college, like the whole nine. I'm like, I'm doing this, committing.
And then ultimately that led you to go to the Art Institute of Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And what did you think about the Art Institute of Pittsburgh, like just as a education portal, like for
So
you?
so for me, I got out a lot because I was commuting. So when I was there to work my butt off, really. You kind of get out what you put in there because the school has its own goals that it's trying to achieve. And
Yeah.
just know, like, if you remember that you're just a dollar sign to the executives and that to the faculty you actually matter, that's a big distinction. Gabe Saber and Jeffrey Stiers, Ricardo Washington, all those guys, if you showed the initiative while you were there, they had no problem taking you under their wing and like really drilling in principles and stuff. And I can't thank them enough for that. Like I got out what I needed because of people like that.
No, and I can definitely back that up. Of you have to put in the extra effort. You're not going to go there and print a degree that guarantees you a position in the games industry. It
They,
doesn't
they,
work like that.
they'd like to tell you it does, but no, 100%. If you're only doing the work that's assigned to you, you won't cover the breadth of knowledge that you need to really be competitive when you get out. I think the rule of thumb that a lot of us jokingly committed to was like every project in school, do two outside of school.
Yeah.
And it was tough, right? Especially if you want to do the 3-year track. I mean, you're doing, in 11 weeks, you're doing a semester's worth of work. And then, like, by the way, do more work. Like, don't stop. It can get
Well, you
daunting.
you find these like cliques of people kind of form in colleges. So it doesn't have to be necessarily the Art Institute,
Nah.
but just like you'll find people that push you, right? Those people could be people online, even if you don't go to school,
Yep.
right? There's a core groups that you see form, and then those people rise above, and everyone else kind of gets left behind a little bit. And it's just part of the game where once you have that competition or that motivation because you see the people around you are kind of advancing their skills more rapidly, but also you're sharing. So it's not just like me versus them thing. It's my friend learned this new technique, so now he can teach me it. And you like all bounce ideas off each other and you all rise together basically.
That was like what got me into ZBrush was actually my friend Ryan Ernst was trying to be a character artist at the time. and just really going ham on ZBrush. And I was like low poly max guy, like all the time. Like
Yeah.
I was like, no, I don't need that beveled edge. It doesn't need to look pretty. It just needs to run. Like I kind of always had this mentality of keep it simple, stupid. So like even my models would do that. And then he brings me to ZBrush and he's like, hey, that wall piece you're trying to make makes it in like 5 minutes in ZBrush and it looked better than mine. I was like, okay, pause. What is going on here?
No, and that's an issue too that you can find where it depends on the platform you're developing for, right? Like sometimes you'll notice that you're going too low poly because you have an instructor maybe that is kind of stuck in a certain way, right? Making a modern computer game, like verts are pretty cheap. Right?
Yeah, the joke is like what 600 or less and it's free. So
yeah, basically.
yeah, it's 100%. It's more like using materials efficiently and things of that nature, and not using fragment shaders. And we can go down a whole road of that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, verts are the silhouette of a model is technically the cheapest part. I mean, don't quote me on that, but I feel like that way.
No,
Sometimes.
compared to materials, draw calls, bones, everything else,
Yeah.
like it's pretty free.
Yeah,
You know,
like, it was really tough to break myself out of this mindset. It took me actually like way outside of school, and I think after I left Shell, I finally was like, yeah, I'm gonna throw some verts at this and kind of make it pretty. And it took me a long time to get comfortable with that because I was so paranoid about making things run that I was actually hurting my visual art.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. And that, I think that's something me and you have even talked about in the past a little bit, which is like sometimes, especially when you're working your portfolio, right? It's like there's a key, still make good choices in terms of topology and how many triangles you do really need. If you have excessive edge loops and things like that, like just get rid of those. But at the end of the day, like you're going to get hired as an artist, like based on the quality of your art, and I would always rather hire or work with people that make great art that can then always lower it down.
Yeah, and I went the opposite way, and I've cost myself some opportunities career-wise because of that, because I was choosing to kind of work within a box that doesn't need to exist, but in my mind it was very important. And so I would be working on something and deciding, no, I don't need those extra edge loops for this thing or that. And then I go to bake it down and I'm like, man, I really wish I had those. And
I wish I had a normal right there. It would have captured the detail so well.
Yeah, and I was like, nope, I got a seam there. We're going to be painting that out later. So it's very interesting. And I'm still not a great artist because I focus on a lot of other stuff, but I want to say that I'm working on it. It's work in progress.
So what do you think, like, we're kind of talking about like us getting started and things like that. Like, what advice would you have for someone that's just getting started? What do you think you would want to tell them?
So if they're like me and they're hesitant, I'd really say don't be afraid to get your feet wet. Do not think within the confines of an assignment only. For my first year and a half of really learning the programs and stuff, I was afraid to explore and experiment with the tools given to me to make all these awesome things. I was just like, okay, what are we making today? All right, well, we're going to start out real simple. We're going to make a cone, a box, a tire, if you remember all those. And then like people would come back and they'd have like variants of it that were really cool. They're like, oh, I want to do this assignment, but I did a sci-fi spin because I want to do these other things. And for the longest time, I worked out of a box because it was safe. And I would say don't limit yourself that way.
Yeah, and if anything, I still remember like the first time I ever opened up 3ds Max, which is obviously a modeling program, and I couldn't even create a box on the screen. And then eventually I did, and I was so excited.
You just dragged a little primitive in, and we're like,
no, I couldn't. Oh, I especially didn't know how to rotate. I remember that. I drew a box. But the rotation, because it's in Max is on the middle mouse button, no, it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
But I was like, yo, I'm a 3D artist. I made a box on the screen.
So I don't know about you, but the first time I opened Maya, I was like in middle school working on like a 4.3 CRT monitor at my desk. And it was like from like an Aldi's book, like one of those $5 Maya guides with like an expired license.
Yeah.
And like I installed it and was like making the little like primitives, like what's the little swirly like
Oh, the Helix and stuff.
Yeah, stuff like that. And I remember just like having a screen full. It looked like a really weird alien solar system. And I was
Yeah.
like, yeah, I'm doing this thing. I couldn't turn the camera. I couldn't select objects once I placed them. So instead of like manipulating stuff in 3D space, I was using it as like a canvas with depth for the longest time.
I
And
remember, yeah, it's like, and that's good. Even if you're just getting started, like those are small victories. Don't feel like looking at someone that's been in the industry for 10 plus years on ArtStation who's got a killer portfolio
oh man,
because they've got thousands of hours into their artwork.
I fight imposter syndrome like every day. I go online and look at people's work. It's so daunting and so awesome when you see the talent that's in the industry. And like I used to look at them as competition only and like, oh, why am I even trying? This is like so daunting. And now I'm like, no, let me post and see if they're going to acknowledge me. Like, let me get some feedback from them. Like,
Yeah.
and honestly, my work is not great, but I get responses when I actually post, which is like twice a year because I'm terrible. Like, post all the time. Don't do what I do. When I posted though, I even if nobody else was responding to my thread, I was posting. And so you'd get like 5 or 6 and then all of a sudden somebody's like, hey, I like the direction you're going with this. This is really cool. Do some
Yeah.
of these things. I think it'll be better. You kind of have to show that you're not just like a flyer by, like that you're actually kind of doing things and being active. And the more active you are, the better it'll be for you because people know you exist.
Well, and then again, like, that leads to job opportunities, right? Like, I don't know about you, but like the people help you get jobs in this industry because it is so small.
I agree. This was a lesson that like I didn't really even understand until I left Shell.
Yeah.
When my contract ended there, I had a year off, and I decided to move down here to try to get a job at Epic. But they don't know that.
Yeah.
They hired me anyway. I got them. But I moved down there, and it was immediately apparent that like there's people that I had formerly worked with that were like either had just left or were here,
Yeah.
and it was so small. And then when you see like those mutual connections, I've seen like Bonnie and Heidi and Jared was just down here for a convention. I missed out on seeing him. And these are
Sure.
people that I'm like, I won't see them again. We're in different studios. And it was
Yeah.
like, no, they're 10 minutes from my house and I'm going to go have dinner with them and hang out. Like, it's really a small field. And the major conventions, like, everybody flocks to them. Like, people will know you by your online handle if you're posting and being active. And then you go to like the Polycount meetup parties at GDC and stuff, and you're going to put a face to the name,
Yeah.
exchange contact info, and then you don't know what kind of doors are going to open up from there. It's huge.
I mean, the joke even in with that is that, there might be people out there right now that are like, well, I don't work in the games industry. I don't know anyone. Like, how do I break in? And like we're saying, like Polycount, like I'm going to use Polycount over and over again.
Of course.
Polycount.com is like one of the best godsends out there
Yeah.
for game artists. But then on top of that, like go to conferences, go to GDC, go to the bars and just hang out. Like, so I told my students before, like, even if you can't afford the pass to GDC, buy a plane ticket,
Yeah.
go with a bunch of people to a hostel, and then just go to the bars after.
Yep.
Because you're going to meet everyone from every game studio in the world. And you can be like, here, I'm looking for work or I'm trying to get a connection. And that's where the real connections happen. It's not during the day, during the conferences, because you're just sitting there listening.
Yeah. And you're going to be considered rude if you're trying to like network while somebody's giving a really good presentation.
Yeah, no, that would be very bad.
Yeah, don't do that. Yeah, no, it's 110% like those after parties and the hangouts and the meetups are very important. Also, I don't know, I can't remember how active it is in Pittsburgh anymore, but like the IGDA and like the meetup groups,
Yeah.
like if we have one every month in Raleigh, Game Dev Drink Up at the Hibernian down here, and once a month, and people come from all the major studios here. We have Red Storm, Epic, Boss Key, and Amanji's down this way, and like people just come up and network and they talk and they move around, and one project finishes, you move over. It's very important. Like the industry is small, and we like to communicate because we live behind a screen. So when you get out and get to talk, it's very nice.
Yeah, no, I get behind that for sure. So what do you think? Like, you've been in the games industry for a little bit now. What are some of the negative things that you don't like about the games industry? What do you think could be improved?
So it's, oh boy. So the most honest thing I can say has been frustrating because I've been on the wrong end of it for a while is like the
Yeah.
contractor mentality. That's kind
Yeah.
of the biggest issue I see is that for business reasons, it's more cost effective majority of the time to have contractors basically on retainer. and that's kind of the only thing. People call it paying your dues or whatever.
Mhm.
And yeah, if you're good enough, you'll get hired, right? But if you're kind of in this marginal gray area where you're good enough to keep your job, but you're not like, out of this park amazing, you get stuck in this group of people that are, they're hired on because they're experienced, but they're not full timers. So you kind of lose some of the job security and you're kind of more transient. Uh, that's
Yeah.
really the biggest negative because it makes you concerned. You're always worried about your contract end date and if this project does bad or well, am I going to still have a job? And I think that's more the industry at large, but I think for contracting is kind of the biggest red flag that I can warn people about. If you're not okay with paying your dues and you might get stuck in this for a little bit and you don't want the anxiety, I would just be careful. That's all. Be aware before you go in.
Yeah, and to like kind of second that, even when I worked at High Moon out in Carlsbad, it's like that was an experience where it was for a fixed amount of time, and I remember like putting in my dues, and my director was like, "Hey, I'm trying to bring you on full time. I really like your work, but they're not letting me put the paperwork through."
Yep.
And it was like a really odd experience where I was like, okay, well, my date's coming up, so if you can get it through, that'd be great. And then it came to an end, and
Yep.
I basically had to find new work, and that's eventually how I ended up at Shell Games, and I'm still there and very happy.
Yeah.
And
That's
but
that's very.
it was one of those things where like the reason why was because they actually ended up like basically laying everybody off.
Yep.
So contractor mentality and layoffs is a big issue in the games industry. So you have to be kind of comfortable with this idea that you might have to move in a year, or you might have to
Yeah.
move every 4 years, just depending on your position.
Yeah, to,
But
to piggyback off of that, when I was at Shell, that contract started out as a 3 month thing to help you guys get that project out the door,
yeah,
and it turned into a like 10.5 month, can we potentially hire him kind of situation, and it just happened to not work out. Timing and budgetary reasons, all that stuff. And I wouldn't change any of that. I learned so many skills there and got my little various services nameplate from there, and I
yeah,
I wear it like a badge. It sits on my desk now. It happens. It's part of the field. But if it wasn't for that contract experience that I got through one of the teachers at AIP, talking
yeah,
about small world, it's important. Like that stuff set up the building blocks for me to get a job at Epic.
hmm,
And, from there, we'll see what happens. I don't know. I'm still a contractor, so I'm in the same boat still, but I'm still going to work every day. I still love what I do. Like that's kind of the other side of it that I'm not explaining is that you end up loving what you do. You like the people you work with,
yeah. I
and
mean, we might as
there's
well roll into it. Like,
yeah,
what are the best aspects of the games industry? Like, what do you really like about it?
really like the camaraderie, and I mean that in like not in a sarcastic way. Like when everybody's putting in work on a project, whether you're crunching or you're just trying to build out like what's going to be like your vertical slice, or you're making a pitch and you want a demo of gameplay to do that. Like when people are working together on that, and it's the whole blood, sweat, and tears mantra. It's true. Like it doesn't matter if you're QA, your art. If everybody's crunching and working, and you have a solid team that works well together, there's a sense of accomplishment when you get out the other side and you're like, oh, there's some daylight. Here's a little bit of coffee, and it's
Yeah.
very fun. Like it's a trip. I like it a lot.
Yeah, no, I think it's the same thing for me. It's a lot of like you get really strong teams about everybody is trying to make the best thing possible. Like there's not many people that get into games because they're like just trying to feel it out, you
Yeah.
know?
Or they try it and they don't last. They don't stick around because it's the pros have to outweigh the cons, or you're going to sacrifice your happiness, and that's not what the point of this is, right? Like
Yeah, no, totally. Like you're gonna eventually either burn out because you just decide it's not what you're looking for. But I mean, for me, the positives of it always are the people you get to hang out with, and then also just the variation of projects, right?
yeah,
Like if I had went to engineering school and worked for, GM, I'd be working 6 years on a single bolt, where like I get to work on potentially 4 or 5 different projects at a time with Shell because we work on a lot of weird games and projects and amusement park rides and all kinds of stuff as well as games. So it's interesting in that regard for sure.
yeah. Like the variety is interesting. I mean, if you look at what I've worked on, I've only been active, I guess, since 2014 technically, and
Yeah.
I worked on Lexica, and it was like that reading RPG on tablets. We did. Then I moved over to Epic, and I worked on Paragon, which is like third person MOBA, like with realistic graphics and everything. And then, now I'm working on Battle Breakers, and it's a mobile title, and it's very interesting seeing like the different approaches for all of these things. Like none of them are the same, none of them are hooked up the same. You're never doing even the same pipeline will be different in a different studio.
Yeah, no, totally. I can get behind that. Yeah, the pipeline's always changing too, and like depending on even the game you're on or the project, even in the same studio, it seems like it's always
Yeah,
you're
so like
learning new tools or you're evolving your skills just in some way.
yeah, like I graduated, and between the time I graduated to when I started my internship 6 months later, Substance had come out, and I was like, "Wait, time out! What is this thing?"
I'm screwed. Things are not well.
I had to like reteach myself how to like learn independently of like a syllabus, because Max, Maya, ZBrush were all taught to me like in a organized setting, and then I branched out from there. Then I got Substance. I was like, okay, back to square one. YouTube, my best friend right now.
Yeah, and that's true for this industry, period, right? It's like the software will always be changing every day, and you have to adapt or die. You just won't last if you're not trying to evolve your skills.
No, I agree 110%. It's never ending. The tools I'm using right now to work on things are not the same tools I used a year ago, not the same tools I used 2 years ago. And even if they're the same name, they're always different under the hood. I don't listen to that.
Let me ask you a random question about kind of your education. Like, what do you think was like your biggest misstep or like biggest missed opportunity for your career that you might tell somebody else to try to avoid?
Okay, so for me specifically was focus on what you want to do more. When I was in school, I was so focused on like working my after school job, commuting, and doing these other things and trying to be like a TA. I should
Yeah.
have taken a lot of that time and just said, I'm going to live a little bit more. I'm not going to make as much money, but I'm going to cut my hours at work, and I want to really flesh out my 3D art and do this thing. Because it's 3 years after I've graduated, 4 years after I've graduated, and I'm still trying to learn what that is.
Yeah.
And I should have spent more time doing that while I was in school, just because it would have been easier, because the atmosphere you were in would have supported it more. Now it's kind of like, well, I get home from working 8 to 10 hours, and then I have to also then open up, Max Maya, and then jump into my own stuff, and it kind of feels like you're working two jobs.
No, and that's a great point. Like I've even mentioned that to some students I had in the past where I said, now's the time, right? Once you leave the college environment, be it whatever, online or whatever, you're going to have a full-time job and probably a girlfriend or boyfriend or partner. And you're going to be in a situation where the amount of time you have to make art is like zero.
Yeah.
And then you have to like then take away from something else to get back to plus.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And then on top of that, kind of to your point, the hardest part can be when you're either making art all day or using up your mental energy to come home and use that same mental energy again. You don't necessarily have enough in the tank and you just need to recharge. And it's like by doing something different, you're like, I just want to kind of veg out. I don't want to have to use my brain again.
Yeah, there's definitely like a cool down period if you like blow all your abilities on a project, and then you're like, okay, wait. So
yeah, no, totally.
For me, I just went through that last week. I was doing like kind of like hitting a double header, like pitching a double header. I was working on performance stuff and all my QA needs at work, and then getting home and immediately working on an art test for a company and trying to get that done. And it ended up being like 4 a.m. the first night. I went to bed, got up at 7, went to work, and then 6 a.m. the following night to do the same thing. And I cranked it out. I got all of it done, but it was very time sensitive. And I was like, oh man, I got to get this done. So you'll burn the midnight oil a little bit, but that's just what you have to do.
Yeah.
You have X amount of hours in a day, and you've got to get stuff done. That's what happens.
Where do you think the game industry is going in 5 years?
Oh man, tough to say. There's
just in your own personal opinion. Like, if you're just having fun with it, you're just trying to decide.
Blue sky in it. I really think like this.
Or where would you want to see it go? Maybe that's a better question.
So it's tough for me because I'm kind of the games I like to play are kind of the ones that are taking second fiddle right now.
Yeah.
For me, like to give you an example of the kind of games that made me want to do this, Metal Gear Solid 1 was the first one. I was way too young when I played it the first time. I was like 8 or 9, but I really liked it. And then actually, well, because we used to whoop me at the office at this, but Halo 2 like was my other one.
I
And
played a lot of Halo.
yeah, so between those two, I got a taste of two different types of games that I really enjoyed for different reasons. And a lot of that was just like, for Metal Gear, like storytelling and stuff, and just watching something that I'm picturing in my head come to life for the first time. So for me, those types of experiences are what I would love to see become viable again. That way, more studios want to make them.
Yeah.
But the way the industry is going, I think between like AR and VR, more augmenting the things around you and making it a more unique experience versus like this pre-canned uh, set path that you're going to follow, I think is why the industry is changing. It's you find I think you find more of an audience when people get to interpret things more their own way. So when you see like AR and VR and it's kind of like in your own space in your own comfort, I don't know. I think there's a reason why like it feels like the industry is pulling that direction. Maybe I'm off base. I'm not sure.
What's interesting is you just gave me like a weird idea. I remember seeing there was like a Microsoft prototype or something where there was a living room and they were like projecting onto the floor and the walls. Like,
Oh, the HoloLens, that thing.
not the whole, like that was an HMD that does augmented reality kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But there was a video where like people were sitting on a couch without glasses on, and they were staring at a TV screen, and they were like projecting, like, people sometimes will project on the building and make it look like a giant spider's climbing down it because they like scanned it in 3 dimensions. I almost imagine a world like that would be kind of fun, because for me, full VR is awesome. It's very immersive. Like, work on it all the time. Yeah. But I almost imagine like that's uncomfortable. It's like it takes a lot of energy, to put a headset on. You like get motion sick, like to run around, even physically. Like it just is exhausting.
You're not wrong.
But I wonder if there's a world like you kind of maybe think of something where I could still just sit on my couch, but wouldn't it be sick if like my room like transformed, like not in like a VR room, but like my physical room like transformed to like help facilitate the 2D experience, or more of an augmented, like I'm playing, Gears of War, and it's a cover-based shooter, so it's still on the screen, but every once in a while, like a projectile flies out, or like I punch an enemy and he like flies into my room. Like augmenting my space, I feel like is something that could be great, because then I can still sit like a lazy dude on my couch and be like, this is cool.
I definitely think you're onto something there, where you're in the gimmick of like the VR and the AR stuff kind of disappears, and depending on what you're left with, that experience isn't for everyone past the first 20 minutes whenever they've never done it before. I know it caught me off guard whenever I was put on a VR headset for the first time, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. It's in 3D space. But then I realized I was like on one knee. I was like looking underneath things. I was like throwing puzzle pieces together. It was really weird. And I'm like, would I want to do this for like 8 hours straight or 5 hours straight if I was like doing one of my Halo 2 day sessions? And like, I don't think so.
Yeah, just like even from a physical standpoint, like having tested people, like hundreds of people through I Expect You to Die for Oculus and Vive, it's like you're just gonna get sweaty and nasty, and you have this thing that's like dripping sweat on your face, and then you come off and you're like, ugh.
I did that I helped clean up a few of the bugs with Robo Recall, like just helping them get stuff into the database. And I remember the first time I played that, they're like, just get used to the game. And I blinked, and it was like 4 hours had gone by because I was standing using the Oculus Touch controllers, and it was very immersive. It was like very realistic looking. And so for me, it was like, I was sold at that point. I'm like, I need to go drop all this money on a thing and get ready. Upgraded my machine. And then I was like, wait, I don't have the money. So like, wait, but like, it's just, once like you get into a rhythm, or you find something that you really enjoy and it resonates with you, and then like, the rest of the stuff kind of disappears for a bit. So it'll be interesting. We'll have to see.
What do you think, like, what are some good books or resources you might recommend for people in the games industry, or things that you found interesting in the past that have helped you out?
So I'm actually like right now, because things iterate so quickly, going with like print media, if it's not for traditional stuff, like just like painting value or like lighting, I'm very hesitant to suggest it, because sometimes it's out of date by the time you're ready to dig into it when you pull it off your shelf. I've really been on like, Polycount, when people do breakdowns of stuff, I'm on there. 80 level is another one that I've been on, that like they feature really cool things.
Yeah, I really feel like they came out of nowhere. Like
I blinked and they were on my Facebook feed, and I was like, follow, and now I just have about Oh, on my phone, if I opened it, there's about 30 tabs in my Chrome browser that
Yeah,
I'm
they're
like,
killing it.
these are things I need to read later. So, yeah, it's interesting. Like when you want to specialize and do stuff, if you just enter things on Google, like man, there's so many resources.
It's so
Uh,
much faster, and I think you hit it right. Like a lot of books and stuff, like just can't keep up with the games
I,
industry at a
I have
point.
a shelf here in my dining room that is full of art books, of reference material, of things that I've written down and printed, and I bet you a fourth of it is relevant, and the rest of
Yeah.
it is just out of date now. Even things like mastering Unreal Lighting or like UDK or like Unity books, and I'm like, what version of Unity is it? Forget it. That's not worth it now. Like, so it's tough. That's why I think online's your best bet.
No, I'm totally behind that. Like, you need to stay current. You need to stay up to date. Print media stuff is great, especially like fundamentals books. Like, aren't going to go out of date. Like,
No, there's
art
actually
fundamentals are
one
still there.
I'm thinking of right now. I can't remember his name. Yes, I can. Hold on a second. Scott Robertson. His
Yeah.
whole series. Though I think I bought the one on Perspective because it was just I wanted to work on my 2D skills a bit to help flesh out ideas I had, or I would do a blockout and then go to do a paint over, and I'm like back in kindergarten finger painting. It was very bad. So
Yeah.
I was
No,
like,
totally.
okay, let me spend like $20 or $30. Let me get this book of like traditional things that I just either flaked on in school and didn't do good in, or things I need a refresher course on, and like something like that never goes out of date. Like
Yeah.
training your eye. I think you were the one who like explained to me this concept, like training your artist's eye over and over again, and like being able to critically see the flaws and the things you need to work on. It might stink sometimes, but like correcting those mistakes and like learning and getting them stronger, it just makes the rest of your art come together.
Yeah. No, it's that hand-eye thing where the critical eye will always get better. That's why as an artist you never feel like you're improving, because the
Nope.
second you draw something or create something that looks great, your eye like jumps up in quality and you're like, well, we can create better than that. And
All
then
the time.
you
Ugh.
never can get to that level. You never feel like I'm good. And if you do,
No,
that should scare you because it means that you're not still evolving.
no, I have like I said, the imposter syndrome is real, and like we have a few channels at work where we post our own stuff and we get feedback there, and occasionally, like if an artist or something pops in, and you're like, oh no, 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 it's not ready, don't look at it. Like it's daunting sometimes. I'll be in the middle of an environment and I'll look at the things I did at the beginning of it 3 or 4 months ago, or the things I even did like a week ago, and I'm like, oh man, I could do that better. And I get in this vicious cycle of like redoing the same half of the environment over and over again.
So let's just finish out with something here. Like, if you had a time machine and you could go back and give yourself some advice or do anything different with your game art education, what would you do differently, or what would you tell yourself?
Well, so for one, I would reassure myself that yes, you're gonna want to do this, because there was definitely some days where I'm like, do I want to spend this money? Do I want to, make this commitment to something so specialized? And the answer is yes, because now that I'm in the field more and I'm active, it's been a blast and I like it. So I would reassure myself that yeah, you're going to enjoy this career path. Two, buckle down on the work and not worry about making money and stuff right away, because that was always my thing. I chase money all the time. So I was working two jobs, going to school full time, and still trying to commute an hour each way, and it was just too much. I should have focused on what I was there to learn more so than like running back to my job at the time. Uh,
Yeah.
so really, just yeah, if you're whether or not you're going to school, because there's so many more resources now than before.
Mhm.
Even if you're not going to go to like a traditional school for it, just make sure that's your focus is like buckle down, do the work, be active, take feedback and critique humbly. Don't be offended when people are trying to help you. That I see that a lot, and I used to be that way. I was very apprehensive when people wanted to explain to me what I could do better. I was like, man, that's my work, man. Don't you tell me that.
Yeah.
I was very hostile, and I think that hurt me for a long time. So
No, and it's something that can happen too, because it does. A lot of people come out of high school or young professionals. Not necessarily that's everybody, right? Some people can be other professional careers and they're trying to switch over
yeah,
and not used to that critiquing kind of background of how you get feedback. And some people are just not very like soft either with their feedback. Looking at this guy right here, it took me a really long time to
I don't
learn
know
how
what
to
you're
be
talking
like,
about.
like how to be kind of more adjustable to the type of feedback you need to give or want to give.
Yeah.
So Well, Brian, where can people find you online? Like,
Oh,
where are you at?
I swear I think I'm still the only Brian Fasten on Facebook.
That's amazing.
If you get on my portfolio website, it's just brianfasten.com. Right now it's down because I'm getting ready to put new work up. I also have an ArtStation, same thing, ArtStation/Brian Fasten. And then Polycount, I think I'm B Fasten on there. But you can poke around, you'll see some of my old work. I think my most recent stuff was from a couple months ago. Once this art test is all out of the way and I can post some stuff, I will. Yeah, I'm all over. I think, like I said, I think I'm the only one, so you'll find me if you try.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome, dude.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap up, Brian. Anything else you want to say before we go?
No, I appreciate you having me on. It's been great. It was nice catching up and talking about all this stuff. A lot of these questions spur thoughts in my own head, so for that, I'm grateful. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no.
It's been a pleasure.
I think, honestly, if you guys, anyone that's been watching or you guys watch this in the future, if you want to like, subscribe to the channel, go for it. Again, hopefully we'll just have more people on like Brian, who's awesome, that talk about the games industry, things that work, things that didn't work, and ultimately, if it feels like it's something you want to do with your own career. So, all right, Brian, can you get out of here?
Oh, yeah, I think we can call it. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you again, Brian, and we'll talk soon.
Sounds good, bud. See ya.
All right, cheers.